I'm gonna post a link in chat. It's also on the slide, and you can just go to that. Yeah,
I
you can
believe
use
Replit
Replit.
works fine.
Yeah. So if you guys want, you can use that link. It doesn't require you to sign up. And you also need just some basic knowledge on how websites work, being HTML and CSS. What is a browser? If you don't have that, I will explain right now. So we all know what a website is, but in technical terms, a website is a collection of files that a browser requests from a server. For example, Google Slides. If I type in slides.google.com, the Google server will send the Google Slides file to my browser, and my browser will interpret it as the Google Slides page. Now in this, websites are built using 3 languages. Basically, they're HTML, which is the format of the page, CSS, which makes up the style of the page, and JavaScript, which we are learning today, is the interactivity of the page. So websites can be static or not interactive, meaning you can just like look at it, or they can be dynamic, where you can do things and the website will respond. And JavaScript helps makes these websites dynamic, and you can program the behavior of certain elements. So what can it specifically do? It can change the content and style of HTML. It can program code for events like clicks, so interactivity. It can store data. It can read and write to it. It can work with browser settings. It can work with servers, and so much more. So JavaScript is something that goes hand in hand with HTML and CSS. If you don't know HTML, that's okay. You can just try copying down this code right here. I'll put it in chat. Just copy that down into your editor. If you want, you can run that code. So there's no output right now. JavaScript will go between these tags. So under this line, this isn't required. So between these 2 tags, you can also write it in an external file. But for this workshop, we're going to be writing in between. Okay, everyone with me so far? If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. So first thing we're going to learn about is variables. I think the most fundamental part of any programming language is a variable. Variable is a container for what is a server? So a server is a machine that basically serves a website. It has the files for a website, and the browser can connect to a server by typing in the URL, and the server will send the files from itself to a browser. That's just basically how websites work. So back to variables. A variable is a container for storing data. We're going to look at this right now. Our first line of JavaScript will be declaring a variable. You can do this by writing the var keyword, var space, and the next comes the name of the variable, also called the identifier. The identifier is case sensitive, like this. For example, message, an equal sign, and then whatever we want to assign. So I'm going to write hello world. Notice that I write it in quotes. I'm going to explain this later. This is called a string. Text values are called strings. And JS statements usually end with a semicolon. It is not required, but it is recommended. So as I am writing this, you can look at the slides and see the arrows that point to each different part of the code. You can also look at the code I'm writing, and I encourage you to write the same code that I'm writing in your editor to help you understand the language better. Often in JavaScript, you're going to have to declare more than one variable, like this. So let's say we have one variable, John, another variable, last name, like that. So here what we have done, we have one statement on one line, another variable statement on a different line. You can also do this without semicolons. You can just write a comma, and you don't have to write the var keyword again. like this. Got it? Also, one thing I'm going to be doing is that I have my console open. So you guys don't have to do this, but this is something that you can do. You can write console.log. Between these parentheses, you can write stuff, and whenever you run the code, it will write it to this console. Again, you don't have to do this right now. First name and last name. Oh, they're just written like this is called camel case. It's when you have lowercase and then uppercase for every different word. It's not required. No, you can just like write it like this if you want. You can write it like this. I just like writing it like this. I guess most of the tutorials online use camel case. It's not required. And this tutorial will probably be using that the whole time. Now, when you have a variable, you're going to probably have to reassign it later on, especially if you don't know what it is. So to do that, you can just write this. So var first name equals John. You don't have to write var again. You can just write first name equals Smith, just like that. In this example, color equals red, color equals green, just like that. We're gonna skip this slide and this slide. Okay, so in this workshop, we're gonna have a few quick quizzes. Basically, there's gonna be a question on the screen, and you don't have to answer it to me. You can just like think what the answer might be to yourself, and then I'm gonna show the answer, and you can just assess with yourself. So what is the correct way to declare a variable with the identifier or name, university name, and the value MIT? Is it A, B, or C? Just think to yourself, and then I will reveal the answer in a few seconds. So the answer is B. So A is incorrect because it looks correct, but it's tricky because the N here is not capitalized, but JS variables are case sensitive. So this would be something different from this. B is correct because it does do the capitalization correctly. It also only has one equal sign. In JavaScript, when you declare a variable, you want to have only one equal sign. If you have two equal signs, that means something different. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Next thing is data types. Data types are just types of data. For example, we just did strings. Strings are just text values that you can write in double quotes like this. Like that. If I run this, you will see next step. Or they can also be in single quotes. That would mean the same thing. You cannot have a double quote and a single quote like that. That would not work. That would throw an error. You can also have a number. For example, person's age is 14. Or the number pi is 3.14159, etc. So, and a non-decimal value like this is called an integer, and a decimal value like this in programming terms is called a float, or a floating point number. If I was to log these two, like that, we would see these two numbers, 14 and 3.14159. The next data type is a Boolean. A Boolean is a type of data type where there are only two outcomes, true or false. True. This is helpful in like binary situations where there's only two outcomes, off or on, yes or no, etc. Arrays are special because they are not just one data type, they are a collection of specific data values. For example, test grades. So they begin with these brackets, and they end with a bracket, and they separate specific data values with commas, sorry. They separate them with commas. 1, 2, 3, like that. And I can log this array. Like this, and the console will show up for me, just like that. And an array doesn't just have to have numbers. It can have strings, it can have booleans, it can even have other arrays in it, like this. And objects, an object is basically an array, except it uses curly braces, and each specific data value has a name to it. For example, first name, John, age 13, something like that. Yeah, it's similar to the CSS syntax. In CSS, you use semicolons, and there's no equal sign or bar. An undefined value, like this, is helpful when you don't know the value and you need to reassign it later in the code. So you just have to write the var, the identifier, and you can just leave it at that with the semicolon. So if you log this, you will see that it's undefined. The value isn't like the word undefined, it just shows that it doesn't have a value at all. Alright, here's another quick quiz. There are some values on the left side and some data types on the right side. So in your head, match each value with its correct data type. For example, is 2.71828 a boolean, number, array, or string? Just do that for the other three. And I'm gonna reveal the answer. So 2.71828, also known as Euler's identity, is a number. It's a floating point number. This is an array of a number, a string, and a boolean. True is a boolean, and Homo sapien, which is a text value, is a string. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. The next part of JS are called operators. Operators, by definition, are characters that alter operands and produce a different result. Rohit asked a question. Can you add vars like name first, etc.? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Like that? So no, you cannot add a dash in JavaScript variables. In addition, it has to begin with a letter. It cannot begin with a number. There can be a number somewhere in the middle. Okay, so there cannot be dashes. So operators, back to operators, they are characters that produce a different result based on operands. This sounds really complicated, but it's just these kind of things like addition signs, subtraction signs. Let's say I have two variables, x equal to 1 and variable y equal to 2. Now I can assign a third variable to the sum of these variables. Oh, sorry, x plus y, like that. If I got the output of this, it would be 1 plus 2, which is 3. In addition, I don't need to write these as variables. I can just write the numbers and it will be 3. 1 minus 2, or x minus y, would be negative 1. You can do the same thing with addition and subtraction. Multiplication and division. Multiplication, you use an asterisk. 1 times 2 is 2, and division is a slash. 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. Next come some assignment operators. So we've already learned about one assignment operator, which is the equal sign. It assigns the variable to a value, which is why it's called assignment. There are actually different types of assignment operators. For example, if you have the regular equal sign, you also have the plus equal sign like this, where it is the same as doing this. Now, some of you might be confused here because x can't be equal to x plus 3. That doesn't work in algebra. But in computer programming, this is valid. This would take the value of x before and add 3 to it, then it would reassign it. So then x would be equal to 5. This is perfectly valid in JavaScript and lots of other languages. So instead of writing it like this, we can just do plus equals. And I have some other ones here, minus equals, times equals, and slash equals, like that. Okay, so one thing about the plus sign is that it doesn't just apply to numbers. You can also do it with strings. Not mathematically, but you can combine them together. I'll show you what I mean in a second. I have two strings, first name and last name. I can add them together like this. And make that its own variable. If I was to log that, we would get Jane Doe, which is Jane, and then a space, and then Doe. I added a space because there are no spaces here. So if I removed that, it will look kind of weird. And this process is called concatenation, when you combine different strings like this. Alright, so here's a quick quiz. I have a variable, and I assign it to the value of 2, and I do some operations to it. So once all of that is done, what is the value of the variable? If you want, you can use a calculator. I'm going to reveal the answer. The answer is negative 16. So we have 2. We're going to add 9 to it because plus equals. Then we're going to do 6 times 11. Oh, Alex got it right. Nice. 6 times 11 is 66. 2 minus 66 is negative 64. Negative 64 divided by 4, because of the slash equals, is negative 16. Next thing we're going to learn about is conditionals. And to learn about that, we have to learn about something else called comparison. You probably have written compare and contrast essays before in school, and this is very similar to that. Comparison is testing how two values are alike or different. For example, 2 and 3 are both numbers, but 3 is greater than 2. And conditionals are blocks of code that only execute if a certain comparison statement is true or false based on the conditional statement. So here are some comparison operators. We have double equal to, which means is equal to. Remember, we had a quick quiz about that before. So this means something different in JavaScript. The exclamation point and then equal to means not equal to, and then we all know less than and greater than. So we can see this in action here using if statements. Let's say I have two variables, age, which is a number, 17, and then message, which is a blank string, which I can do with just like quotes like that. Now let's create an if statement by writing if, open parentheses. We can write a comparison statement here. Let's see, age is greater than 18. So if age is greater than 18, open brace, the method, we are going to reassign message to the value you are an adult. And at the end, we can write what it will be, like that. So what are we doing here? If age is greater than 18, the message will be changed to you are an adult. Now, our age is 17, and 17 is not greater than 18. So when we run this, it will just be blank because this code didn't execute because 17 is not greater than 18. This is what an if statement does. It evaluates a certain statement. If it's true, or sometimes if it's false, it will run a specific set of code. So usually the statement has to be true, but it can also be false, such as in the case of if-else statements. So after your if statement, by the way, if statements don't need semicolons. they are not required. After the if statement, you can write the else keyword, create your own pair of new braces. Between these braces, you can write a different statement to assign the message variable to maybe you are not an adult. So now, if the age is greater than 18, you are an adult. If the age is if the age is greater than 18, you are an adult. But if that's not true, meaning the age is equal to or less than 18, because those are the only other possible outcomes, the message will be you are not an adult yet. If I run this, you will see you are not an adult yet. You can also add something called an else if statement, which is basically making it more specific. Write else if, add a pair of braces between the if and else, parentheses. Between these parentheses, you can write if age double equal to 18. Message is equal to you have just become an adult, like that. So if the age is greater than 18, the message will be you are an adult. But if the age is equal to 18, then the message will be you have just become an adult. And else, meaning if age is less than 18, you are not an adult yet. So if you run this, it will be you are not an adult yet because 17 is not equal to 18 or greater than 18. If we wrote 18, it would say you have just become an adult. If it was 19, you are an adult. So here's a quick quiz. It's the same if statement we've been doing. What is the value of the message variable if the age is 14 and this code gets executed? So what would the value of the message variable be? Would it be this, this, or this? Okay, so the answer would be you are not an adult yet. 14 is not greater than 18 and it's not equal to 18, so the else block would run. Okay, functions. So functions are similar to if, else, and else if statements, but they only run when you call them. They can help you when you need to reuse a specific set of code. You need to run code in different ways, and we'll see that right now. Let's write function name, and braces. Then we can write some code inside. So what have I done here? I've written the function keyword, space, then a function identifier, like a variable kind of, add numbers, that's the name, a pair of parentheses here, and then open and close braces. Again, no semicolon down here. Now between these braces, just like if statements, we can write like regular JavaScript code. So we have our two variables. First number is equal to 2. Second number also equal to 2. The sum of these numbers is equal to its own variable. Like that. Now we're going to use a new keyword called the return keyword. And we're going to return the sum variable. And what this does is it gives the function a value. So to execute this code, if we just ran this code, it wouldn't do anything. As you can see, it doesn't do anything because it's in a function. So the function only runs if you call it. And you can call it by typing its name and the parentheses after it, like that. Now the function ran, but we didn't see anything happen. That's because we didn't log the output. We did this. Put the function inside this log function, and we would see 4. Why? Because 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. And the return value, the return keyword, adds a value to this function and makes it 4. So we can also do something like create a variable for it. And it would do the same thing, like over here. What are function parameters? A function parameter is an input value that you can give to a function. They go between these parentheses. For example, we have first number and second number. I'm just going to write F and S. We can remove these. We can actually change this to F and S. We have the sum is equal to these two parameters sum. We can return that. So how does this work? This is how we might call a function with no parameters, but here we have two parameters separated by a comma. So we can, instead of F and S, we can substitute them for actual values like 2 and 2. If I was to log this, we will get 4 because 2 plus 2 equals 4. Now let's say I want to add different numbers like 3 and 4. Make this its own variable. Then we would get 4 and 7. 4 comes from here, 7 comes from here because 3 plus 4 is 7, 2 plus 2 equals 4. So basically we just created an addition calculator. This is how you can make JavaScript functions do different things based on the input. Okay, here's a quick list. It should take a little longer. Write a function in your editor that will convert a Celsius temperature value to Fahrenheit. And if you guys need help, I'll be writing one with you. This will need one parameter, which is the Celsius value, and you'll have to return the output, which is the Fahrenheit value. If you guys don't know, the formula is over here. 9/5 times the Celsius value plus 32 is equal to the Fahrenheit value. Another thing is that the order of operations, like PEMDAS, that doesn't really matter in JavaScript unless you have parentheses. So in this case, I don't think you have to worry about that in this case, but just to be mindful of that. Okay, so this is my function, and the answer has shorter names. So I create a value, I calculate it, and I change it to Fahrenheit. And here does the same thing. Notice how here I created a variable, and then I returned the variable. But here you can just return the output value without creating a variable, which saves space and time. If you don't know, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, which is the same as 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Ran that. This should give me 212, which it does. Any questions so far? If anyone needs me to go slower, please tell me. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Now we're gonna start integrating. Please go slower. Okay. Now we are going to start integrating HTML and CSS. So my goal for this workshop is not for you guys to memorize all the code and the syntax, but just for you to get an overview of what JS has to offer. And then maybe after this workshop, you might be inclined to go to a tutorial like W3 Schools and then see all the information for yourselves. Because there's a lot of information and it takes a lot of time to learn, but it's definitely worth it. So right now we don't need the console anymore. I'm going to use the HTML output. So HTML at its basic sense is made up of different elements like this hello world text. It's between these two tags that have the word H1 in it. That shows that it's heading type 1, which makes it really big and bold. There are also smaller headings like H2, which are smaller like that. Or you can use things like P, which stands for paragraph. That would just make it a regular paragraph text. So how is HTML structured in JS? Like this. So let's say we have a variable. We are going to assign it by selecting this paragraph tag. Now, how do we do that? Now, JavaScript has a lot of inbuilt functions that you can use at your disposal. One of these is document.querySelector, like that. Now, document.querySelector, it goes through the HTML code and it finds the element that you tell it to search for. In this case, the parameter will be P. So it will search for the first element with the P tag and it will select it. Now, we don't really see the selection happening, but it is happening. We'll be able to see it a little better once we start changing HTML. We're gonna skip this slide. Okay, so this is how we change HTML. So it says hello world here, but it outputs how are you. And this is because of this code. We are selecting the paragraph tag, and now we are going to access its property called inner HTML. Inner and then HTML in capitals. This is case sensitive, so you have to write it like this. You can use a dot like you did here and here to access a lower level of the element basically. So this element has different aspects or properties. For example, its style, its color, the content inside it, how big it is, etc. So this is how you can change it. In addition, you don't have to declare a variable. You can just do this. This would just do the same thing because you are essentially selecting the element and then changing the HTML property. In addition, you don't just have to insert text. You can also insert other HTML. So these B tags will actually make this word bold, as you can see here. Something like that. We're gonna skip this. Okay, quick quiz. Which code will change the paragraph text from hello to goodbye? So take a look at all the text, all the code, A, B, and C, and make your best guess as to which one is correct. Okay, so the answer is C. I understand why some of you might think A, and it's mostly right, but the thing about A is that the HTML in any HTML is not capitalized. So that would change a property that does not exist, and that would not change the content. So HTML has to be capitalized, like it is here. But what's wrong with this is that you didn't declare a variable here. So then if you try to run this, the computer will get confused as to what the P variable is since you never declared it. Here, you don't declare a variable, but you directly change the inner HTML property of the paragraph element. This is the correct answer. Does everyone get that? Document.getElementById. Okay, so this is a different type of selector. So we know query selector, which can select different types of elements. So elements in HTML can have something called IDs, such as this, ID equals paragraph tag. What you can do, instead of query selector, you can write get element by ID, which is a different type of selector. Then you can type the element name here. then that would select it, and then you can do whatever you want with that. So basically, this is just a different way to select it. You can also do what we have been doing, like this, and do the same thing. Or you can add a slash, and then you can select for IDs. So it would be the same thing. You guys don't have to worry about this for now. Okay, so CSS. Some of you know about CSS. Basically, it's the coding language embedded in HTML that helps style different tags. Right now, I have a kind of black, boring HTML tag, but I can make this kind of lively by adding some properties for it. And one of you guys pointed out that these are similar to JS objects, which is absolutely correct. So I have this, but once I add the CSS, it becomes nicely formatted. It's blue, it's bold, it's a different font, it's bigger, and it has double underline. So CSS is structured in a similar way. So first, let's declare this. Okay, so I'm going to make this red. That's the only thing I'm going to do. So we have this. And we're going to select the element. Got it? So we have this. And now, instead of doing inner HTML like this, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do style, which is another property. And style has its own sub-properties, like color. And then we can assign that to blue, like this. If we run that, it will make it blue. In addition, we don't need the variable like last time. We can just do this. That would do the same thing. There are lots of other CSS properties too, such as font size. We can make it 10 pixels. It's kind of small, so then we can make that bigger. And notice that if there's a dash in the CSS style, we don't write it with the dash, because as we did before, as we saw before, that won't work. We remove the dash and we change the next word to a capital, like camel case. And I think this is why a lot of tutorials use camel case for variables. It's a good habit to get into. Let's do from 10 to 20 pixels, and that makes it a lot bigger. Also, none of these styles have to be here for the JavaScript to work. It'll just do it anyway. For example, we have an image here. We have some CSS, and we're changing it. So with the CSS, you would see this. But with the JavaScript, you would see this because it changes everything. P.style.font size. Oh wait, what do you mean? Like, what do you call the code? You just have to like write it like this. I don't understand. You have to like write with a capital letter. Is that what you mean? Okay. So yeah, you have to write it with the capital letter. Don't miss the lowercase letter, because that means something different. So we're gonna skip this too. Okay, quick quiz. We have some CSS code here for an H1 tag, but if the CSS code wasn't here, then what could we do to replicate that with JS? Would we use A, B, or C? Okay, make your best guess. The answer is C. A has the dashes in it, that wouldn't work. Also, we forgot to add the style word in A. We did that in B, but B also has dashes. So these two wouldn't work. and C is the only correct answer. The last lesson we have are event listeners. So many websites allow you to interact with the website, meaning you can do stuff like click or move your mouse and the website will respond. And this works using code called an event listener. So for this, we are writing document again, like we did before. But we are writing a different function called add event listener, like this. Just like that. Now this function has two parameters. The first one is a string, which asks for the event type, which will be click in this case. So when we click on the page, something's going to happen. What will happen is the second parameter, which is actually going to be a function. We can actually have functions as parameters, like this. Whatever is in this function will run. For example, the alert function, you might have seen this before, is a built-in function, which I don't have to declare. If I click on the page, it's going to show this like message box. You've probably seen something like this before. It's really easy to do. It's usually helpful for development purposes and debugging. Usually you don't want to use this on a finished website. In addition, you don't just have to add the event listener to the entire page. Like you can also add it to a specific part of the page, like an element. When I click on this page, it works. When I click here, it also works. If I just want it to work when I click on the paragraph tag, I can change document to document.querySelector. Then select the paragraph tag. We select the paragraph tag, then we add the event listener, then we add the function, which states what we do when we click on this tag. When I click on the page, nothing's happening. When I click on the tag, it will say you clicked on the page. In addition, you don't have to put this function here. You can declare it separately, like this, like that, like we learned. Then we can write the function without parentheses, because if we write it with parentheses, we will call it as soon as we run the code. We don't want to do that. We only want to do it when we click on the tag. Now it doesn't run. Now it does run. Can I add it to a button? Yeah, you can add it to a button. So if you have a button here, you have a button, you can click on it. Oh, sorry. You have to change it here too. If you click on it, it will work. Umar's is raising, I think someone was raising their hand. You guys have a question? Okay. Here are some, oh, sorry. So here's the event listener code. Okay. On the slide, there are some other events. These are just a few. I think there are about 100 JavaScript events that you can control. There's click, there's mouse over, there's drag, there's a load, there's key press, scroll, and full screen change. So as you can see, these are all things that you can do on your computer and the website can respond to them. So here's, I think this is the last quick quiz. Match each HTML element with an event type. So we have some elements on the left, some event types on the right. Just match them in your head and I'll reveal the answers in a second. Okay, so these are the answers. The button element would obviously get a click because you usually click on buttons. A hover menu would be mouse over or hover. A text box would be key press because you're typing into it. A full screen button would be obviously full screen change. Any questions? Okay, so now with some broad understanding of JavaScript, let's try making a project. Online counter. So we're going to try making an online counter. It's going to look like this. We're going to have a minus button and a number in the middle and a plus button. When we click on the buttons, they're going to change this number by adding to it or subtracting from it. So how do we do this? First, we're going to add HTML. If you don't know HTML, it's okay. I'm just going to explain. First, we need a button to increment the counter, a button to decrement it, and a text such as a text element to display the counter as a number. So here's some code. Just if you don't know HTML, just like copy this code down and I will explain as I write it. So the first one I'm writing is the decrement button. So as you can see, I'm writing an ID for it, so it's easy to access. Span is an HTML element, which is like the p tag, like the paragraph tag, but it behaves a little differently. So it's, I'll show you in a second. This is the increment one. I added a plus sign here. So if I run this, we have this, this, and this. When you click the buttons, nothing happens. I'll give you a second to type this down. And I'll show you why it's better to use span instead of p. So if you use p, this happens. So p takes up its own line. It puts the other two on other lines. It doesn't want to share the line. So that makes it kind of like awkward. Span will stay on the same line, which is better. You can change how elements work with CSS. I think span is just easier because you don't need CSS for it. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Now we're gonna start writing some JavaScript. First, declare variables for these three elements using the document.querySelector method. If you know .getElementById, you can also use that. So there's an example on the slide. And remember, to access the ID, you have to type a hashtag first and then the ID name. Okay, so I've written down the code, and there's also some code on the slide. So we have increment button is the increment button, decrement button, and instead of counter, I put counter element because the next thing we're going to do is create a fourth variable called a counter variable. Define a counter variable and set it equal to 0, like this. This will help us keep track of the count on the JavaScript side. Okay. Now we're going to get a little more complex. We are going to write a function that when we call it or run the function, it will update this HTML counter element with the value of the counter variable. So remember the inner HTML property that we used. And here's the function syntax if you forgot. Okay, so here's the function that I wrote. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. It can have like a different name. It should basically just be like this. So counter element, the element variable that you have, dot inner HTML is equal to the counter variable. So example, if I ran this, it will make it equal to 0 because it's equal to 0 here. This was 1. Oh wait, forgot to call it. In programming, you might like forget things and tend to make mistakes, and that's okay. What's important is that you learn from them. If I run this, it will make it 1 because the counter is equal to 1. Make it 0, and it will do that. Don't call the function in your script right now. The next step is to add the increment event listener. So add an event listener to the increment button, the plus button, that whenever you click it, it will increase the counter by 1. Remember the plus equals for this? You can increase it by 1. And here's the event listener syntax, if you forgot. And also, once you increase it by 1, call the update HTML function that you increase the counter, and then you change it on the website. Okay, so here's the code. You want to write like this: increment button dot add event listener. First parameter is click, and the function is you're going to increase the counter variable by 1, and then you're going to call the update HTML function. So what this does, if I click this button, it will increase it. Yeah, I'll paste the code in a second. We're almost done. So when I click this button, it will increase the number on the JS side. It will increase this variable, and then it will call this function and change the HTML like that. The -1 doesn't work yet, and we will add that right now. So just do the same thing, but for the decrement button. And remember to decrease it by 1 instead of increase. I'm just adding some comments, so if you guys are confused, you can look at the comments to see each part of the code. Okay, so this is the decrement event listener. Now, if we run this, it should work. When we click the button, it will increase. When we click the other button, it will decrease. Just like this. Okay, here's the code. Okay, so I put the code in chat. Okay, so that's the end. I hope you guys had fun. You've taken the first steps to mastering JavaScript. My goal, like I said, my goal for this workshop was to just help you guys get a broader understanding of JavaScript, see what it can do and how it works. And if you guys want to learn more, I recommend going to w3schools.com. It teaches a lot about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We hope you enjoyed this workshop. The raffle form for this workshop was just posted in the chat, so you can finish that up. That will be the last workshop raffle form that we're going to be distributing, as all the workshops have now been concluded. We hope you all had an awesome experience, and thank you so much to Sanjay for hosting this wonderful workshop.
Thank you, Aditya, for giving me this opportunity.
So have a wonderful day, everyone. Remember, all projects are due tomorrow at 8 p.m. So you have around I would say more or less 29 hours to complete your project. And thank you all so much for attending. We hope you have a wonderful day, rest of your day, and happy hacking. See you all in the closing ceremony tomorrow. Bye.